Welcome back to another episode of the Lonely Liberal Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Zankin, and I'm so happy to have you on this lovely Thursday show. A day late, my bad. I'm running around like a fool, but I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm so happy to be here. We got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about something that I've been thinking about a lot the last few weeks, which is, what the heck do we do with Graham Platner? I mean, my God, the now Democratic candidate for Senate for this midterm election is just giving me a big headache because he's someone I endorsed. You know, he's Bernie endorsed, but he's just doped in scandals. And let's be real here. Maine should be the easiest Democratic Senate pickup of this entire midterm. I mean, Susan Collins, the 5-term Republican incumbent, is the only GOP senator representing a state that Trump has never won. I mean, that's as vulnerable as it gets. Also, it's a midterm. The president's unpopular. This is all good stuff for the Democrats. Yet, somehow, we have this nominee who is just covered in a mountain of personal scandals, has divided the party, forcing everyone to take a stance. And like I said, this is a guy I endorse, and I've endorsed him, like Bernie has and a lot of others, because he stands for a lot of things that I believe in, of course. But like I said, tons of scandals. So we have a lot to talk about because, like I said, this is giving me a headache. So I figured we go do a rundown, see what happens, see where we land, and kind of get a better feeling of how we should feel and how should we approach situations like this, and more importantly, how we got here. So, like I said, a lot to talk about. But before we get into it, make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, whatever. I really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get to it. All right, first, just a little bit of background on Mr. Graham Platner. So he was born and raised in coastal Maine. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He's done 4 combat tours, 3 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan with the National Guard. 8 years of service. So he's worked for the State Department. He's an oyster farmer, as you all have noticed from his ads. And he was kind of big on the scene with his initial launch for his Senate because he has that Nick Offerman, Ron Swanson voice like, "Hello, I am Graham Platner." But also he said his opening line of his announced campaign was so good. It was, "I'm not afraid to name an enemy, and the enemy is the oligarchy." And that got, leftist progressives, me, frankly, all fired up. We love this guy. Oh, yeah. Bernie gets the endorsement. And ultimately, as this kind of anti-PAC, anti-establishment, working class populist candidate, he won. He beats Mrs. Janet Mills, the current governor of Maine. He won the primary really, really staunchly. He got 72% of the vote, which is a record for a primary. And he, like I said, the most votes anyone has ever gotten in a primary ever. So no doubt about it. The message was right. The voters responded. That is good. But like I said off the top of the show, this dude is covered in scandals. And I figure we might as well just go through them honestly because they're not all equal, but they all are weird. So the first one that came out were these Reddit posts. So these old posts from 2013 to 2021, so over a long period of time, came up, right? And some of these posts called himself a communist, not so bad. All cops are bastards, not so bad. And some saying that rural Americans are racist. Whatever. Just Reddit leftist crap. Fine. All cops are bastards. I mean, if you are offended by that, you need to calm down. There was also one, though, that is more serious, which is like a conversation about sexual assault and victim blaming and yada, 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 which is more edgy and bad and probably should be investigated further. That being said, when he was confronted with this, he said, "Look, I have PTSD. I have these combat tours. It was a rough period in my life. I'm a different person." And I do think that context matters. Obviously not excusing sexual assault posts and blah, blah, blah. But, you can see the context that would lead someone to be rage posting on Reddit a bunch of random crap. Then the next one, which is the one that you may have already heard of because it was the first one to get a lot of publicity, is this tattoo of his. So he has a skull and crossbone chest tattoo, which resembles the Nazi SS Totenkopf, which he says he got in 2007 in Croatia while drinking with a bunch of Marines. Basically, his story is he picked it off a flash wall, had no idea it was a Nazi thing, and he covered it as soon as he found out. Now, CNN did do some reporting that on Reddit, he called his tattoo his little Totenkopf, or like a cultural marker or something like this. That being said, he also in that said, obviously I'm a radically left guy. I'm just explaining military culture. So I didn't know his defense. Probably not fully accurate. Probably closer to the truth is I knew what it was called, but I didn't think it made me a Nazi. And let's just get it straight. This dude is not a Nazi, okay? His entire public records, his politics, his stepfather being Jewish, none of this supports I'm a Nazi. But again, that's different from I had no idea, right? Nuance. That's what we do here, right? So the other one, this one is recent. So the sexting scandals. My God, Mr. Graham Platner is one horny bastard. So in spring 2025, early in his campaign, this isn't like years ago like the other ones. This is actually after he announced that he was running for Senate. He basically was found to be sexting multiple women. His wife found out and disclosed it to the campaign aides. So this is actually something that his relationship is reckoning with. The campaign has confirmed these exist. Platner has acknowledged it. Yet his wife has said, look, this is just our personal stuff. I'm standing with him. Ignore it. I'm fine. My take is that I'm with him. It's between him and his wife. She made her choice publicly. It's, I mean, when you compare it to, Trump and all that, it's not so bad. I mean, it's one thing if it's your friend, but it's another thing. It's, this random thing. Not really my business, whatever. But of course, this has been reported on because it's juicy gossip. The hardest one by far is the most recent one, and it's this recent New York Times piece about these relationships. And so the context is, we talked about it on the Maine show on Sunday, but if you haven't heard that show and you haven't heard about this, I'll tell you. So the New York Times interviewed 6 women who dated Platner. 3 of them said he was a great guy, and 3 of them called him like a volatile man, and he had toxic relationships with them. But really, the main story of it all is this accuser named Lindsay Fifield, who, by the way, just context, is a conservative activist who dated him for a couple of years, I think 2013, 2014, 2015. She alleges that he grabbed her, pulled her around, and maybe like twisted her arm or locked him in a room. She did say that he never hit her or punched her. The Times said that they couldn't verify this. Friends confirmed that the relationship was very volatile, but didn't verify any of the claims. They also pulled an old diary entry of hers that said, quote unquote, Graham Platner is quote unquote the most toxic, abusive man on earth. That's just true. That was a thing. There's another woman from Maine. This woman is a Democrat, said he was a reckless drunk. Which is really interesting about this Fifield, who has worked for the Heritage Foundation, right? Alt-right Republican. That being said, she actually says the Times were too soft and made it seem easy, like she went easy on him. So it's very conflicting. It's hard, right? These are serious allegations. We're not trying to minimize them, but they are denied by the Platner himself, the Platner campaign, I was going to say. They're unverified, and they're frankly mostly from one complicated source. So, and from a decade ago. So I'm not trying to dismiss this stuff. I'm just trying to give context, right? Just trying to just give you the full story. So that one, like I said, is probably the most confusing because it's not just like online posts or like a mistaken tattoo and stuff like that. The tattoo too, you could say, but the context, I think, kind of pushes the tattoo behind everything. And so that's the story, right? So, like I said, this is a guy who ran on this anti-establishment campaign, anti-super PAC campaign, absolutely smoked Janet Mills, but is obviously littered with these, drama things, these controversies. But again, I don't think this really is the story here. I think the story is, once again, with the Democratic Party itself. Because, let's be real, Maine voters knew about basically all of this before they had their primary vote. And yet, he won 72% of the vote. That was their calculation, right? And that leads you to go to why. Why didn't it matter? With all this baggage, why was he considered the best option available? And again, it's an indictment of the Democratic Party. The DSCC, the Democratic establishment, recruited Janet Mills, right? Chuck Schumer, the face of the Democratic Party, Senate minority leader, personally encouraged her to run. The party establishment once again cleared the field for a safe, centrist, PAC-friendly candidate. And when they did that, they actually made Platner stronger. Because not only did he get to rail on her for being pro-establishment, she's also 80 years old. She's an old bag. So it just filled this narrative of the Democratic Party's out of touch. They're running this old centrist. Look at me. I hate all of them. I'm going to be thing. And the people responded. I responded, right? So it's interesting. And it's because also the progressive bench in this country is thin. Not because progressive voters don't exist. I mean, clearly they exist. It's because the Democratic Party itself has spent decades defunding, discouraging, and primarying out working class, anti-corporate candidates in favor of these consultant-approved moderates. So when you hollow out the bench, basically, for 30 years, sometimes the person who shows up with the right energy and the right message is Graham Platner. Warts and all, okay? So the voters didn't make a mistake. They made the best choice available to him, and now the mistakes are happening upstream. That's why we're here. So what do you actually do? Okay, Nick, you're ranting and hollering. You can tell you're getting emotional. So what should I do? What should I do? That's what I've been thinking about. What do I do? I got the show. People listen to my opinion. Do I keep hooting and hollering for a guy with all this baggage? That's what I keep thinking about. And I think you got to back him because Collins really is that bad. Susan Collins voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh after he told her Roe was settled law. She's been this freaking moderate, quote-unquote, fig leaf Republicans use to pretend they have a conscience, yet she just votes 95% with whatever Trump wants. And also, let's be real here. Democrats haven't won a Maine Senate race since 1988. This is almost certainly the best shot they've had in generations. And let's also give credit to the Maine voters. They already processed this information. And again, they said, 72% of them said, we want this guy running. Okay? So if we abandon him now, Collins gets the seat. But I think also it's true that the left needs better candidate vetting. The progressive movement can't just keep fielding candidates whose personal histories become the story. It doesn't matter how right the message is if the messenger has all this drama. You feel the oxygen leaving the room with him, and it's sad. It's annoying. I feel bad for Bernie every single time he has to talk about this because obviously he didn't know all of this baggage when he endorsed him a year ago. Same here, right? But again, I think the big part of the story isn't Platner. It's not Bernie's. It's the party created this problem. The people who are wringing their hands about Platner's electability are the same people who made him the nominee by coronating Mills this amazing candidate, right? Bernie versus Schumer isn't this personality clash. It's a fight over who the Democratic Party is for. And if you don't align, you're going to keep getting Maine. Or you could get Maine, at least. I mean, think about it. A unified Democratic Party with a clean progressive bench and a working class message, this would be a boring race. Susan Collins would get smoked. And that's so possible if the Democratic establishment or the corporate Democrats, the Schumers, the Jeffries of the world, would just accept that this type of messaging, these types of policies, these types of beliefs and platforms are what their base wants. So Graham Platner represents exactly what we want. The Democratic base has been asking for: an anti-PAC, an anti-establishment, a working class, unafraid to name the enemy. But it's also true that he's a genuinely flawed person with a complicated past that raises real questions. And frankly, not all of them have satisfying answers. And so the tragedy isn't that he's the nominee. The tragedy is that the conditions that made him the best available option were created by the very party now debating whether or not to support him. Maine voters made their call. Now the National Party needs to step up and support the guy, because if not, Susan will be back yet again. And that's our show, folks. Thank you so much for listening today. Like I say always, if you like the show, please remember to like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. You could also write us at media@thelonelyliberal.com. That's media@thelonelyliberal.com. Curious what y'all think. I mean, it's a tough one, right? There's no doubt about it. It's tricky. It's not easy. And I am genuinely very, very curious what everyone thinks, because this one, I can't stop thinking about it, because it's a really good case study, I think, of what happens when the party isn't aligned and there's all these infighting. This infighting, rather. Until next time, I'll see you Sunday, man. All right, talk to you later. Bye.